Yeah, and apparently, because although we'll get there, how the signs and symptoms of the disease, some of the signs and symptoms are quick. People will notice them and rush to the hospital. Others are so mild that until they develop the complications later, that's when they run to the hospital.
They run to the hospital.
But yeah, this disease is quite common.
It's quite common. All right, I think maybe then it's because sometimes we just think, oh, well, this is because we might tend to confuse it for diarrhea. It's just normal. Oh, this will just go away on its own, and then it doesn't, and then you develop complication. Or how different is it then? Because like I said, sometimes we might think, oh, I just have a stomach ache. Probably I ate something bad. Or again, cases of diarrhea, maybe it's something bad and then I'm feeling the aspects of pain and, you know, diarrhea and all those things. So can we then talk about the difference? Yes, the signs and symptoms, and then we can talk about then the difference between then these other conditions that it might mimic.
Well, the signs and symptoms, as I've said, will manifest in two ways.
In two ways, yeah.
Okay, I think it's important I mention before we go further that amoeba presents in two ways. It's the intestinal signs and symptoms, and there are extra intestinal symptoms.
Okay.
Like by intestinal, I mean the signs and symptoms that will strictly point to your GIT, the gastrointestinal tract.
Okay.
And that now includes diarrhea, abdominal pain, bloating. Now, and the diarrhea is quite distinct because it's frequent, usually loose, foul smelling, very foul, and sometimes it comes with blood. So now that now becomes, with the blood, now it becomes amoebic dysentery.
Yeah.
But the same thing is caused by the same Entamoeba histolytica.
All right.
So those are the signs that people will have. People will have nausea, but rarely will they vomit. Really, but the abdominal pain is usually in the middle part, not in the upper part.
Okay.
In the middle, the pain is gnawing, like it comes and goes, comes and goes. And most of the time, the pain will exacerbate diarrhea. The pain comes, then you have to run to the toilet. Very rarely will you have any fever.
Okay.
The only time that you have fevers is when now you have the extra-intestinal infection.
Okay.
Now, by extra-intestinal infection, I mean the infection that is now away from the intestines.
Okay.
Remember we said the root is the fecal oral, mostly. It's something you put in your mouth, so definitely to go to the gastrointestinal tract.
Yeah.
Now, once now as I said earlier, once the cysts have multiplied, they'll find their way into other parts of the body, away from the intestines. They'll find their way into the liver. They'll find their way into the brain, into the pericardium, into the heart, and even sometimes for the very immunocompromised people, it will even find their way into the skin that we call subcutaneous amoebiasis.
Oh wow!
But it's quite rare.
All right.
You immediately need to be very low for you to hit such thresholds.
Yeah.
Yeah. So once it goes to the liver, now it forms another disease, all the same, called amoebic liver. This is amoebic liver abscess.
Okay.
Basically, it goes to the liver, enters into the liver. Liver has several lobes. Enters into a lobe, starts multiplying. Then wherever it's multiplying, accumulates pus.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes for the very immunocompromised, it will this cyst will cross the blood-brain barrier, go to the brain, again bring a brain abscess.
Yeah.
Sometimes it will cross to the chest, to the pericardium, cause something we call septic pleuritis. So these are now the manifestations that are away from the intestine.
From the intestines.
Yes.
Well, and we'll talk about them more in depth later on, especially for the complications, because it can be really, really bad, and it can be really fatal. But how aggressive then is this protozoa? Because from what you're saying is sometimes it just finds itself into areas or organs that you don't even think it can find itself. So how aggressive is it? Or is it dependent then on a person's immunity?
Yes, The dependence of how bad this disease becomes will depend on the virulence of the species that got into you, the Amoeba histolytica, because now it has some subgroups.
Oh, yes.
It depends with the virulence. The virulence is the ability of a microorganism to cause disease.
Yeah.
How virulent was it?
It is, yeah.
And number two, it will also depend with your immunity.
Okay.
Sometimes
Okay.
it also depends with the drugs that you are using currently, either for other comorbidities. Yeah, other diseases that
Diseases
you may
that,
be having.
yes.
Yeah, so it will depend on those factors.
All right. And then, so now, because you talked about, I mean, and especially for the intestinal science.
Intestinal, yes.
Intestinal science. They seem the same as, you know, like cases of food poisoning, you know, just diarrhea from something else and all those things. So then how do we know, and can we just talk about then the symptoms of these others and then differentiate it from cases of then amoeba?
Okay. The most, the other disease that presents like amoeba, intestinal amoeba, is called bacillary dysentery.
Okay.
Now, in both amoebic dysentery and bacillary dysentery, everything is really the same.
Okay.
There's the abdominal pain.
Yeah.
There's the bloating. There's the diarrhea that can also be bloody. And it's loose and frequent and foul-smelling. Now, for the bacillary dysentery, this is the only difference. Once you have that bloody diarrhea, you feel so much pain that it's basically difficult to wake up from the toilet bowl. It's so painful. The others, they're just frequent but not as painful.
As painful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to differentiate it from food poisoning usually will have its onset not more than 8 hours after eating.
After eating, okay.
And it will come with vomiting and diarrhea.
Okay.
Vomiting and diarrhea.
And diarrhea, okay.
For the amoebasis, it's quite hard for it to be associated with vomiting.
Vomiting,
Yeah,
okay.
You feel nauseous, but vomiting might not occur.